everybody about.
She's right there. I see her coming. Okay, as we get started, make sure, Ida, that when commissioners want to speak, that you pass them the microphone, because that's the only way we can get their recording. So make sure you're getting a microphone from Ida if you need to talk, okay? Or you could go up to, the microphone at the podium is also on. So we do have that use also. Okay, I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Town Council and the Planning Commission. Particularly, I'm calling to order the Town Council at 5:04 PM on Tuesday, February 24th, 2026 in the Clark Memorial Clubhouse. Go ahead, Ida. You're on. Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, roll call, Vice Mayor Hunsetter,
Here.
Councilmember Babbitt Pierce,
Present.
Councilmember O'Neill,
Present.
Councilmember Jones,
Present.
and please note that Mayor Prudhomme Bauer here, we have a quorum of the Town Council.
Chair DeBlanc. Vice Chair Amy Bayless.
Here.
Ellen Spence.
Here.
Joe Conk. Here. Marcia Fouts and Carol Johnson. Thank you.
Okay. Item 3 is public comment. The joint meeting invites the public to provide comment at this time. Members of the joint meeting may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. If you're interested in making a comment on the items that are on the agenda, just wait until that item comes forward, and the council and planning commission can open it up for public comment at that time. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward to make public comment? Okay, I'm seeing nobody jumping up to the podium, so let's move on to new business. This evening, we have the Planning Commission recommendations for the housing plan. Ida, I'll let you present that item. You get to present it. It's really your meeting right now because we're second in this one. Okay, so go ahead. You introduce this topic.
We're going to get a presentation from.
Yes, yeah, you're doing 4A. Yes.
Presentation from staff.
Yes, I believe we have a presentation from Scott Ellis, and then he'll introduce, I believe, Martina for comments.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, everybody. Actually, Martina is going to do the presentation. So, as you all know, we hired her as a consultant last year, I believe it was, to update the Clarkdale housing plan. So you should have the draft in front of you. Hopefully you've had a chance to go through it, write down any questions you may have, and then we can go over those and answer any of those. So I'd like to turn it over to Martina to provide you with that presentation.
This, I'm just going to make this a little less complicated for everybody. We also have this item up for agenda, the town council does, I'm just putting that item on too, so when we have discussion, it will be all of us be able to have discussion. So both item 4A and 4B are open. So move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Chair of the Commission. Good evening, everybody. My name is Martina Keel. I am a housing consultant, and I've been working with the town of Clarkdale for about 15 months now on this housing plan that I'm going to be presenting to you this evening. I've talked with the commissioners at one time about housing needs. We did an open house last September, or maybe as early October, and talked about the housing needs assessment. So before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that we had a very small but very mighty working group that met fairly regularly over the course of the last 15 months. I see Superintendent Schumacher back there in the audience. He participated in those conversations, and we had a group of about 5 who showed up regularly, shared their perspectives, their frustrations, and their ideas, and I think they were really instrumental in getting us to where we are today. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and the work and the time that they put in to this process. So the vision for the Town of Clarkdale Housing Plan is to create a strong, sustainable community through housing options for all families and all income levels. So this vision kind of stems from a grant, and actually the whole planning process stems from a grant from the Arizona Department of Housing. And that grant required 3 key elements. One was a housing needs assessment, which is what we talked about last year at the open house, and that document's also posted on the town's website. The second piece of that is making sure that we have strategic actions to address needs across all income levels. So this is not a quote unquote affordable housing plan. It is really dedicated to looking at all income levels and all households in Clarkdale. And then that third piece of it is a commitment from the town council to actually implement the plan. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So as I mentioned, this is the process that we've gone through. We had a working group meeting at the end of January to go over the draft plan. We have our meeting tonight. We're moving forward at a faster clip than I had anticipated. So we may or may not have another meeting. And then we will anticipate that implementation will begin with this coming fiscal year, which is July 1, 2026. So I want to talk a little bit about the housing needs assessment because I think it's important to frame the strategic initiatives and the actions that I'm going to discuss. So the housing needs assessment looked at kind of what drove us to where we are today, what got us to the market conditions where we're at today. What are our current housing affordability and other housing needs in the community, including a strong, solid look at working households. And then it also looked at kind of projecting the number of households, housing tenure, and future housing needs among various age cohorts and household types. So just as a quick recap, most of the demand from 2020 to 2024 was driven by in-migration. I mean, that's probably no secret to any of you. In fact, about 98% is my estimate. So that's almost all. Most of the households were older. And when we talk about household income, we're looking at incomes that are averaging $90,000. This is IRS tax return data, $90,000 a year, which is $10,000 a year higher than households who are not moving and $20,000 a year than households who are actually moving out. So the demand from these households coming in with the higher income, about 3/4 of them were previously owned a home. So that means, they came with an opportunity to invest equity, and the demand drove for single-family development. So that's how we pretty much ended up where we are today, was the in-migration, the high demand for single-family housing, pretty much pricing out people who were working, and earning those two-earner households in that $70,000 range, kind of just pricing them out of the market, or at least making it very difficult for them to participate on an even playing field with the people who were coming in. So I think that is really like the key background piece. If we were to say somebody was going to put down a $20,000 or a 20% down payment on a new home, priced at the median in 2024, they would need an income of somewhere in the range of $175,000 a year in order to be able to save enough money and actually secure the financing that they need in order to make that purchase. It's a significantly higher than the incomes that we tend to see in our area. So that is, I think, an important piece. And then I think the other piece that I wanted to share was about the growth in households over the age of 65. Pardon me? No, I'm fine. I have it here. Okay, I'm still on this one. So as soon as, thank you, Gus, as soon as I get there. So the other thing that we saw was an increase in rents, obviously, because the demand was high. And that corresponds for a 2-bedroom rental unit to an annual income needed of about $64,000 a year. And if we're talking about first and last month's rent and a security deposit, the ability to save about $4,000 in order to enter into a new rent on a 2-bedroom unit. So it's a challenge on both sides, particularly on the purchase side, because of the very high demand that occurred. So a little bit about the identified housing needs. We looked at low and moderate income households. And what we ended up discovering that there were 194 low and moderate income households, including almost all single people, 141 single people. And most of these households are in need of rental units because homeownership is beyond their reach. They're not going to have the income per se to be able to afford to make a purchase. When we look at monthly rents, we're looking at rents as low as $520 a month, which is very difficult to produce a unit that rents for that for a single person in their prime working years, up to about $1,400 a month for a married couple over the age of 65 because they tend to have a higher, albeit fixed income. The other thing, when we looked at middle and higher income households, we found we had 63 middle and higher income renters, including 48 families in their prime working years, age 35 to 64, who were experiencing housing challenges. These households, unlike the lower income households, with the right type of development and the right type of assistance, could have the opportunity to purchase, but we are looking at homes priced in the roughly the $200,000 range in order to help them enter into home ownership. Significantly lower, obviously, than where we're at, but some might argue it is doable. The final piece of the needs assessment looked at older households. So the vast majority of our growth has been and will continue to be among households headed by a person over the age of 65, and that includes people who are aging in place. So, we just kind of will see that age cohort continue to grow. And one of the unfortunate things that happens as we age is many of us become single. Or we experience other life events that leave us vulnerable to housing cost increase and other types of essential expense increases. So we took a look at what does it look like if we perhaps try and look at some downsizing opportunities for households who are maybe not quite wanting to leave the community, but not also wanting to maintain their larger home. So when we look at that, we start to look at housing prices that are probably falling a little more within the range of what the development community says they might be able to do in the 260 to 415 range. So those are probably a little more doable. One component of the senior housing need is the need for rental units, particularly for single people over the age of 65. And I was here for the Meals on Wheels conversation, and I thought that was very telling, to hear, we have a large group of people who are visited regularly with meals. And sometimes rental housing actually provides an opportunity for people to live more closely with their neighbors and be less isolated, which may be the case if they're living in single family housing. And I take it back, that wasn't the final piece of the needs assessment. We also did a walking inventory of housing conditions in 3 Clarkdale neighborhoods: Centerville, Foothill Terrace, and Patio Park. And what we discovered in that process, that there were 49 homes in need of repair or replacement, including 27 that were in need of substantial rehabilitation. So those would really probably be, many of them, homes suitable for replacement, and many of them are older mobiles and manufactured homes. So we set a goal, because that's what we do when we make a plan. And we said we would like to add 150 homes to offset Clarkdale's housing needs over the next 10 years. That includes 50 homes for low and moderate income renters, including those seniors that I mentioned, 50 rental or home ownership opportunities for households of all income levels. So we really want to look at how can we get as many people into home ownership as we're helping get into rental units. Considering seniors, having some set aside units or some targeted units, 25 rental or home ownership homes, depending upon where the demand may lie, because it is a demand, housing is always a demand-based function. And then the repair or replacement of 25 of those homes that were identified.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, that is in addition to anything that has been currently approved? That plan for those numbers?
I would say it is in addition to anything that's been approved that is targeted towards, these categories. Yes.
Thank you.
But, if you want to take credit for something that's on the table, that's not a bad idea either. So in order to address the goal, we established 4 strategic areas. The first is encouraging homes for all families and income levels. The next is encouraging public and private partnerships and investments, preserving community character and neighborhoods, and community education, with community education being a required component of the Arizona Department of Housing grant. So before I talk about the initiatives and the actions themselves, I want to give you 2 quick definitions. The first definition is income-aligned housing. So what's income-aligned housing? It's when a rent or a home price is set based on a dollar amount that would be affordable to a household at any given income level, with that affordability index being 30% of household income. So every year, HUD publishes tables that say these are our income levels. They do them low, moderate, very low, and then from that we can extrapolate middle and higher income, so that we can be looking at, what targets are we reaching as homes are priced into the market and new rental units are added. The second is employer-assisted housing, which I want to distinguish from income-aligned housing, although there may be some overlap. And that's housing in which an employer has made a financial investment. And that looks like something like providing land on which the housing will be built, providing rental or home purchase assistance to their employees, or perhaps participating in the financing of housing either directly or through a loan pool created by a group of local employers. So I'm going to talk about incentives as we go along, and I wanted to distinguish between, I think, these two important definitions, because we have a goal for those income aligned units, that's that low, moderate, middle, and higher. We also have a goal to secure private investment and private interest in making sure that our workforce and our community provides stable housing for people across all income levels. So our first category of initiatives is encouraging homes for all families and income levels. And so we have several foundation actions, and these are things that will start in years 1 to 3 and we will continue to do throughout the course of the plan. And then there's one longer term objective. So the first is to connect resources, residents with the available resources. And so this is going to be a regional effort to make sure that their residents have knowledge of the different types of housing assistance and services that are available across the Verde Valley. The next is to actively be communicating the housing goals that have been established when development partners and other collaborators walk in the door. So it's saying, hey, this is an important thing in our community. How can we work together? So it's adding it to that top of the checklist. We want to make sure we have that conversation. The third is deferring, reducing, or waiving town fees for income-aligned homes. So this is a kind of a low-hanging fruit when we come to talk about incentivizing development and helping to work with the development community to expedite housing being developed. And that's something that if you're going to be waiving fees or deferring fees, at some point will likely require some kind of budget authority in order to make that work. And then the fourth is to encourage the use of the pre-approved ADU plans. The ADUs are an opportunity in some areas of town for existing owners to add accessory dwelling units as rental units and provide additional rental housing for those who are in need. Looking longer term, because there needs to be a conversation when we start to talk about more in-depth incentives. Looking longer term, we're talking about providing incentives for income-aligned homes. So that will be a stakeholder conversation, an elected official, appointed official conversation. What do incentives look like? Some incentives might be used in other communities that I have recommended or suggested that Clarkdale take a look at are things like density bonuses. So if we're doing income aligned housing, maybe we allow for 10% greater units in a development than would already be approvable. Also looking at flexible development standards. So maybe there's some parking standards that can be waived, particularly if we're near a CAT stop or if we're dealing with senior housing and fewer or single person housing where we don't need as many parking spots perhaps. And then also looking at things like setbacks, lot coverage requirements, and other standards that may be applicable. But it's a conversation that needs to be had. And that'll give you those first couple of years to really kind of delve deep into that before you start to look at implementing any kind of an incentive. So our next category of initiatives is encouraging public and private partnerships, and that's where this important piece of employer-assisted housing also comes into play. However, in years 1 through 3, kind of as a foundation activity, it's absolutely necessary to look at expanding and improving town infrastructure. So this is about looking at financing opportunities, looking at grant opportunities, and pursuing those opportunities in order to specifically to encourage a variety of housing types. So there are different financing mechanisms, old financing mechanisms that have kind of returned to the arena that the town can be looking at in order to perhaps finance infrastructure. And then just like deferring, waiving, or reducing town fees for income-aligned housing, making that opportunity available for employer-assisted housing as well. Looking longer term, kind of the sister to the incentives for income-aligned housing is incentives for employer-assisted housing. I would view those very much the same as I would view income-aligned housing, just with that caveat of we've got employer involvement in the financing or the development. And then when we start to look long-term, we're looking at encouraging mixed-use development in the downtown area, which I know is already kind of in the works. And then very long-term, developing town-owned land in partnership with a private or nonprofit developer. And that could include a community land trust, that could include any other type of nonprofit or a private sector developer who has the appetite for income-aligned housing. Our third category of initiatives is preserving community character and neighborhoods. So this is about sponsoring semi-annual neighborhood cleanups in those neighborhoods that would benefit from that kind of cleanup. The other thing that does for us is it helps us to connect with people who may be struggling with their housing, seniors in particular who may be having difficulty, say, with the upkeep of their homes. And it also lets us keep an eye on what's going on with housing conditions in our older neighborhoods. Looking longer term, midterm, implementing an owner-occupied rehabilitation and replacement program. NACOG actually has capacity to help implement that type of a program. There are solid guidelines in place across the state that can be fairly readily adopted. It is just a matter of making sure that we have the staffing and the capacity to manage a pipeline of homeowners who may be interested in having their homes replaced or rehabilitated. And then finally is encouraging residential clustering so that we can preserve our open space and increase walkability and connectivity among our neighborhoods. We have beautiful view sheds here. And, you know, when we spread everything out across an entire hillside, we lose part of that view shed, and we also lose the opportunity to connect neighborhoods with each other. So that is a long-term recommendation. And that could also go along with incentives as well and be part of that conversation or something or a separate conversation as may be the case. And then finally, our final strategic initiative is community education, and this is ongoing. You've probably seen the artwork, the children's artwork, and we have, those are sixth graders, correct? Our sixth graders had a poster contest, and they designed the posters that grace the front of the cover and separate the sections of the housing plan, and we have posters that can be placed here at Town Hall. Hopefully local businesses and others will be willing to also put the posters in their windows. So yes.
Marcia.
We need
What is narrate the reverse?
So there is a, currently there's a slide deck. It's posted on the town website. And what it looks at is what is housing affordability for our essential workforce. So it says if we have a, say a physical therapist is making $75,000 a year, if they live alone, what might be they able to purchase or what might they be able to rent? So our goal, so that's just an example, the physical therapist, but we have, teachers and police officers and firefighters, and they kind of the essential fabric of our workforce. And so the goal is to actually narrate that so somebody can just press the button and listen and read along at the same time. And then finally, last but not least, making sure that every year the goals are reviewed, the actions are reviewed, and there's an ongoing discussion about progress towards meeting the housing plan goals and making adjustments as necessary. It is a plan. And we all know the best laid plans, but we do want to make adjustments as necessary and make sure that we're celebrating the successes that we have, because there's a lot of work that's gone into this and there will continue to be. So that's it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Martina. Are there any questions you have for Martina? Yes, Alan.
This question is not just.
Use your,
Questions or comments?
either one. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Thank you. I know one thing that concerns me is I'm 65 and I have a 2-level house, but eventually that's not going to work for my wife and myself. And so it'd be nice if we could transition. It'd be easier if the wheels were greased to get into a single level home, in a comparable area. So that means a lot of things, like builders, architects, all sorts of things, advice that we would need to do that, make that happen. And not gonna enjoy, maybe the real estate commission going from one to the other, but that's part of life. But another thing we moved here 6 years ago that we didn't know about roofers, who to trust, septic companies, all those plumbers and that type of thing. So that would be helpful if we could do something along those lines as well to help people, information there. And then I had a question on the map. That's the subdivision map that's in here.
Yes.
Specifically the Black Hills West 2023. It says it's zoned for R1, but those look like they're R1L lots. They're pretty big.
What does it again say?
So one right by the college. It's the Black Hills.
Yes, yeah, it is R1. Behind the Black Hills, yes. There's a section of R1 and then there's R1L.
Okay, they're R1, not R1L. Okay. And then do we have a full number of the homes that are in real bad shape, or just some of them? Have we gone for the whole town? And
We did not survey housing in subdivisions with homeowners associations. So we just looked at the 3 older neighborhoods, Centerville, Patio Park, and Foothill Terrace. There is that potential that there could indeed be more, and that's something that over the course of time, as people are out and about, can be keeping an eye out. I have a checklist of kind of things to look for. Yes.
How much employer-owned housing do we have now around?
None.
Not, oh, no.
None. We do have some?
Right, right.
Oh, okay. In,
Enchantment, yeah, Resort owns
Where is that?
behind the Moose Lodge.
It's it's on.
Off,
Bent
off
River.
of Bent River Road.
Yeah, and it's a pretty large complex, but interestingly, those employees don't work in Clarkdale, they work in Sedona. So kind of an interesting dynamic.
Right.
And then,
And that's been there for well over 20 years.
Yeah.
in the clustering, could the clustering be anywhere? Could it be, could there be clustering right next to homes that are on 1 acre right now or 1L or what do you envision?
I think that's a discussion for Scott or Susan.
It would depend upon the zoning, so the zoning would have to match that type of product.
Yeah, and usually, you'll see, they'll call them cluster subdivisions, and you will see them on larger lot subdivisions. It's not so much something that happens with, existing platted properties. You usually see it more with new ones that come in, new subdivisions.
Go ahead.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Marcia and then Amy, and I think Carol Johnson has a comment.
Say it's nobody's business, but there's 2 houses in my neighborhood that are abandoned. Is there any incentive, move them along? I mean, they know who they belong to, et cetera, but what is this?
Scott, or I would like Scott or Susan to speak to that.
Yeah, it's something that we can look into, come up with a game plan, meet internally, discuss what that might look like, how we can survey what's out there that might need addressed. And then probably the first step would be contact those property owners and see what they have plans. If they do, hopefully they know they own the property. Sometimes you'll run into that where they don't realize that they still own a property. So it would start with us meeting internally, figuring out how we want to survey what's out there and then go from there.
Give you those things?
Yes.
Yeah, that came up in another meeting recently about a couple in Patio Park. So we were just chatting that we need to come up with our strategy on how we're going to address those. And some of them might already be being addressed and be in a pipeline of process, but let's cross-check what you've got and make sure we're on that, okay?
Okay. Amy and then Carol.
Rash of lease-only developments that I've seen in the valley. Are those things that you're considering? Like that kind of a development? Like would that be something that Clarkdale would in? That the whole thing was probably built.
So I'll take a stab and then pass it on to Scott, but we actually have a developer right now who has submitted a preliminary plat and now is on final platting and or plan design and has had conversations with us that may be a lease only subdivision, but because we don't have a development agreement with them or anything, we really can't control that, but we are hearing that that's a possibility for that new development.
Yeah, and it can get difficult. So you got to weigh, do we want that kind of housing or do we not? And we're giving up housing. And the simplest way to put it is, do we want to get in the business of dictating how people use their property, which we're limited at doing, and more of the state's taking away what we can do anyways. So I think that's kind of a case by case basis. I don't know that I would say that we're attracting it, but would we deny it? That's not something that we really would be able to do. So,
The only time we'd really be able to have input into that would be if we were doing some kind of a zoning change and entered into a development agreement, which is why you see staff pursuing those, that direction sometimes, because we do then have more ability to say, hey, we'd prefer no short-term rentals, or hey, we like this designer. We have a little bit more ability to have input when we're doing a development agreement. But the only time a development agreement comes into play is when they're asking for some change in the current zoning. So and Highlands is a great example of that, where they wanted higher density. And so then we entered into a negotiation on a development agreement, which gives us more say in the project. But then the community wasn't in favor of the level of density that they were proposing. So now they're going to build something that we call by right, which means that it's, that's what it's zoned for and that's what they're going to do. But when you do by right, you also have to remember that then they can add an ADU to every lot, and it can be, and I'm not saying this one is, but it can be a lease only subdivision, and we don't have anything, we can't say anything about it. So,
What-
those are the pros and cons of giving a little bit on zoning and density, because then it gives us some ability to negotiate.
and kind of, some of the things that Martina talked about in her presentation with incentives and that kind of stuff, we can encourage them to not necessarily do that. We can provide those incentives, and the whole development agreement usually becomes a give and take negotiation. So there's ways to discuss that with a developer who's going down that road. But there's not a hard and fast way to stop it 100%.
Okay, Carol first.
I try to put this over here. I realize that the town's hands are pretty well tied when it comes to vacation rentals, but I wonder, does the town issue permits for those things?
Yes, we do.
And so I wondered, did that come into play with this housing study of how many vacation rentals the town has permitted?
We did not look at that.
Because I know in my neighborhood alone, there's more and more, the houses are being bought and turned into vacation rentals. So I just wonder how that plays into the study.
Well, and you're right that we have no control over if they do it or not. There is a bill in the legislature this session, but typically they don't go very far, but we'll see. But right now, our only ability is to do registration. The last time I checked, and the numbers probably need to be updated, but we only had like 25 registered. But I have met with rental companies that monitor that, and they estimate we have upwards of 80-ish in our community.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ida.
Homeowners are now in a position, I see when I walk, I see homes where people really cannot take care of their property the way they used to. Probably widow or widowers or experienced agents. They want to be in their own home. They don't necessarily see an option to go anywhere and stay in town where they feel they belong. And I'm just wondering if an access to learning more about that landscape of people would be this code enforcement. Because, I haven't done anything about personal, but I can identify the homes where I know someone's alone, they can no longer take care of it, can't walk past the sidewalk where they live. Would they want to go into something small or something they weren't responsible for the exterior if it were available? I just think it's sort of an access to a survey of some kind that I would want to.
I think the study kind of shows there is a need for looking at how people who are in their home of a certain age want to stay here and how do they transition? We don't have those facilities here. So does that open up opportunities for us? And I think that began in the three neighborhoods in some of the areas we looked at. I'm sure there's others all over this, but I think it points to a direction without even doing a survey that we should go.
That was acceptable in development. It's something called I believe a lodging house or rooming house. And I don't know if anybody has developed anything like that. And I think if I were alone and still able to be independent, that kind of situation might be something I would embrace if I could stay. So, that's something I've been thinking about for myself. That's all.
Yeah, Lisa, good point.
I'm along the same lines. The Highlands project, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars developing a plan. And it comes to the community and the community shuts it down. And it required rezoning. So it's not something that could just be approved or not approved. It's something that needed the town's input. I agree with you that it's needed. I wonder if there is a way for a developer to test the water prior to spending all that kind of money. In other words, I'm interested in this kind of development. Will it fly in Clarkdale? That's what I wonder, because right now I don't see the incentive for a developer to come in and present something that's higher density because our community will not accept it. So how do we fix that? So can they be presented with an option where they can test the waters before investing all that kind of money? So I don't know either, but this is what this meeting's for.
Amy,
My mom lived in Patagonia, in southern Arizona, small town, 700 people. They have a 6-unit townhome senior housing. I know because she lived in it for about 8 years before I could move her. The town built this for their seniors. They got it through grants, through aging council. I don't know if the town is interested in doing something like that. But these units were built as studios or 1-bedroom, little patios. They faced a central courtyard, so it encouraged that everybody had their own space. That's so. I work with seniors a lot, so I know it's hard to move them out of their home when they don't see the need, but a lot of times they can't afford the in-home care, or there's the loneliness issue that a lot of my clients have. So maybe if the town looked at, I don't know if NACOG has grants or if there's something else along those lines, but if the town of 700 that isn't wealthy by any means can manage to pull together 6 units, I'm kind of wondering what the town of Clarkdale could do, and if we can get more community buy-in. Some of the other areas.
So I think that is in the plan, which is looking at the lands we own and what kind of private-public partnership we could do to bring some kind of housing that's really filling a specific gap. And I think those conversations are already kind of happening, and it's also in the plan. So, I mean, my answer these people vote. My answer from staff is absolutely we'll pursue that. And, which group we're going to be targeting with that, I don't know. I think that's kind of going to evolve, but I think we have land and we believe that, and council talked about this extensively during strategic planning. I think there's support for pursuing some types of projects like that, particularly grant funded and public-private partnerships. I'm kind of speaking for you guys, so jump in.
I'll speak because Susan knows I'm all about this. I believe it would be wonderful for us as a community to come together and say, the hardest thing in development is land, right? And having access to land. And what land does the town have that we could potentially develop a project that maybe hits more than one of these areas, and to try to develop something that could be for seniors and for income-based folks. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And Susan and I have been talking about it. I geeked out on a guy at the last League of Cities and Towns meeting who developed stuff like this. So I think there is opportunity to do that. It is in the 7+ years. I think it will take time, unless we come across the right developer who says, okay, if you give us 7 acres of land, here's what we can do and here's how we'll do it. And, that could happen if we continue to have conversations internally here and then externally with partners out in the housing world. Because I do feel like, for me, the market rate housing development is taking care of itself in some ways. What is very challenging, there was some magic sauce question I asked you at some other meeting, like, I don't remember how I worded it, but the thing that is a challenge is, how do you develop housing for seniors? How do you develop housing for folks who are regular workers who make between, $15 and $25 an hour? How do you do that? So, and to me, that would be the most satisfying place for us to put our energy while we are, looking at the bigger picture. Because we always have to keep our eye on the bigger picture and what will market rate housing do and how will that impact the town. But where our meat, to me, should be around that sort of, where do we find that public-private partnership where we can develop something for us. But that's my opinion. I'm only one vote on the council.
Alan, you had something you were going to bring up? Or
When people no longer live on where's it's just living, not assisted, but independent living.
there are very few. I mean, there's one in Cottonwood, and it's
Actually, Scott can answer that question.
Scott probably knows this better than anybody, Scott.
Yeah, there's a couple of them in Cottonwood. The biggest one being on the corner of Mingus and Willard there. And then there's a couple smaller ones throughout. There's one out on 260 by Goddard Road. And then there's one on Mingus Avenue as well. I don't know if that one's assisted or if it's just independent, but that is senior living as well. Is that I'm drawing a blank on the name of it now. Trying to think. Clover, do you remember what that one is? On Mingus and Candy Lane? The Manor is one on 260. Yeah. That's the one on Willard and Mingus. And then there's one on Mingus and Candy. Yeah. Right.
The village of Oak Creek, Snowlands have separate buildings that have several units of the separate funders.
Right.
There is a very small development, Cornville, that seems to be changing. So I'm not sure exactly what.
Is it in Cornville or Bridgeport?
independence in your living, but then maybe more else, maybe it's a thing. So there's not a whole lot of senior independent living, because I do have looked for that are looking for community, and there's just the assisted living, and they are not at that, they don't need that. So I think if there was some sort of maybe that's trying to court some of those companies.
Really have been meeting with one over the last 6 to 8 months. We're just trying to get him to find a location that works for infrastructure, but yeah, we have been talking to one. I don't think the land is an issue. It's utilities.
Infrastructure is the bigger
It-
issue, yeah.
Because when you're doing a project like that, there's a lot in terms of fire suppression and turnarounds for fire trucks, and just there's a lot more regulatory type of things that are needed for a facility like that. So you can't just plop it anywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of life safety concerns that go into it.
Marnie,
You know, I think this is highlighting something that we need to talk to our friends and neighbors about, is that not everybody who wants to live in Clarkdale needs to live in a single family home. There are a lot of people who, for a lot of reasons, might want to live in a smaller unit, might want to live closer to other people, might not want to have to take care of a yard. And what we are able to offer as a community right now is a lot of single family homes. And that just doesn't meet everyone's needs. And if we can have some other opportunities and open up some of those single family needs, then we can have movement in our community. And I think that's really what we're lacking, is starter houses that young couples can buy and move into, or young people, younger people, and then they move on up to a bigger house, right? And then the kids leave and they downsize, and then maybe finally they want to be in an apartment in a community style thing when they're by themselves. So that's a lot of movement, and we don't have the opportunity for that right now. Right now, if you're my age, you are moving into a house and you're going to live there for eternity, because there's no way you could possibly afford to do anything differently. At least that's what it feels like right now. And so, you know, I think about the house that Michael bought on First South Street for $100,000. Those opportunities do not exist for 20-year-olds in Clarkdale right now.
Which sold in the last 6 months for $425,000.
Right. So that opportunity doesn't exist. The starter home in Clarkdale for people doesn't exist to be able to move anywhere else. And so we have to have some other housing opportunities.
Ida, and then Deb, did you? Okay, Ida.
Downsizing, density, and yet we've come up against not next to me. I don't want to see.
Not my view.
And that's really our big challenge until we get to where we need it. You know, until people get to where they see that they might need that. I don't want to see it. And I don't know what to do about that, that's all.
Yeah, I just, because I said this during strategic planning and most of you weren't there, I'm just going to say it one more time because it's applicable here, which the plan says we need housing along all ends of the spectrum. And from a municipal standpoint, we must add businesses and houses to our system. Our utilities are not going to be viable for very much longer. And so we have to be out in the community working on this issue of people not, just protesting anything that, isn't exactly what they want to see. And I'm trying to be really politically correct, but I'm extremely serious about this, that with only 1,400 users, on our wastewater system. And with all the regulatory changes that are coming down, we have about a $20 million upgrade to our system that's needed just on the wastewater side. So split $20 million over 1,400 people, you're going to see exorbitant rates if we don't add more people to that system. I mean, there's just no way about it. And extending sewer lines, we just extended one or replaced it for $2 million for 27 houses. So us going and extending lines can't be the answer because the system can't absorb those costs. We must add new properties to our system or it's not going to be viable long-term. And, you know, I was in a budget hearing today and we're having to move things around and be creative to make it balance this year. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be out talking to our neighbors that, hey, that might not be the perfect project that you want to see when you look out your front door or you want to drive by or whatever, but it is desperately needed, both from a housing standpoint, but as important from a utility standpoint in this community. It's not sustainable.
I think the recommendations that that Martina presented to us of things to us to consider in developments or density bonuses, those flexible development standards and looking at setbacks for lot coverage, all of those help us maybe not say a whole development is going to look that way, but gives us opportunities in each development that might come forward. So maybe there's a part of one development where we have a higher density than the rest of it. Doesn't have to be the whole development. Flexible development standards, I think, you know, I've always been a proponent of planned area development because that gives you that flexibility to look at our needs to have housing across the spectrum. I know that we've talked about setbacks in our lot coverage during our zoning stuff, but even, you know, and that are, those are all opportunities so that it's not like it's every part of one development. It's spread out across the town and also for the town to look at our properties and say, and I agree with Laura and on this one is that I don't think it's one versus the other. It can be different types of housing to meet different needs. So I don't think we're looking at a wholesale change. I think we're asking to use these tools as development comes forward and embrace that for bringing a diversity, allowing a diversity of people to live in our communities. I know that I want to stay in Clarkdale. Today, I couldn't stay in Clarkdale. There's no place for me to live in a smaller house or a smaller area. When my husband and I want to leave that house, I want to turn it over to somebody, want them to buy it so that they can love it and care for it like we did. But I want to stay in Clarkdale. I don't want to live in Cottonwood. Sorry, Cottonwood. I don't want to live in any place else other in the valley. I want to stay in Clarkdale. Right now, I can't stay here. And I don't know how many years longer I want to stay in the house I'm in. I think there's many of us in that location. You talked about it, Ida. So I think it's how do we open ourselves up and have those discussions with our community around this is okay. I've got, you know, it's okay for us to have some higher density someplace in a development where we can allow that to happen and not just say it's going to be in this location only. I think we can spread it around town and look for opportunities to bring those senior housing developers to town, those developers who want to build for smaller lots for families, for first-time homeowners. Look for those developers. I think that's some area we need to explore a little bit deeper.
Susan, how do we incentivize those folks who have put forth a plan to the town and have had their plan to build approved and they're stalled. So, because I can think of two off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, I think that there's several of them because actually this came up in our budget hearing today. Because on the wastewater side and the water side, we have a whole list of things where we've issued a will serve letter. And so we have to hold capacity in our system for those people, but they haven't moved forward. And I mean, I'm talking ones years and years
Yeah.
that we've been holding. And so we had a conversation today about getting some legal advice about, is there a way to release those will serve commitments? I don't know. We're going to check into that from a legal standpoint. On the ones that are more recent, we're in constant contact with them. I think the big issue has been financing, just getting the right financing for a project. And then there was also on one of the projects, a big issue with getting a contractor. I mean, this is very interesting, but on one of our projects, the developer is saying it's cheaper to build that project in California than it is here right now because of a lack of workforce and contractors in this area. So, we're constantly working on them. They're eking forward. The Bella Mason, no, am I saying? Yeah, Bella Mason, which used to be the Highlands, the new proposal is working its way through engineering and design review, right? Not design review for aesthetics, but like the plat. Is being worked through right now. So that'll be coming forward. The plateau, the last I heard, they had moved the gas line. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, they're eking forward, but incentivizing market rate.
Being nice.
I know you are, but incentivizing market rate, obviously that's probably not what we want to do unless we're desperate. But I know that staff with our consultant, Martina, has worked out a draft incentive policy. I felt it was important that we get to agreement on what our goals are and what we want to do before we start looking at the incentive. So as soon as we kind of put this to bed, we'll be bringing back to you guys discussions about an incentive policy. And I think that's the perfect time to look at what incentives match which products.
And I know we're looking at different housing products out in the marketplace outside of the area that we could say to a developer, look at this company, because it could be that they could bring that cost down for them, and they might have a ready workforce to do it. I know I just saw a custom-built house go up right in a lot over for me that was all built by Frame Tech out on 260. That's pre-made walls and trusses. That house went up in 3 days. So and if you can do that at a volume, maybe 10, whatever, the cost could come down for that developer. And there's fewer people they need on site to build it. So it's, those are the things we're trying to do by going and visiting and seeing different companies and projects around Arizona. Yes, Alan.
Mother, she lived in a condo complex in New Hampshire down by the Merrimack River, at Rose Landing. And I think if we could see examples of, what's possible, and then people with the pitchforks, if they could also see what, is possible and how nice these things could be, the different price points, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, good suggestion. Yes, Lisa.
I think that, myself included, we're going a little astray, because what we want to do is say that, thank you for the housing plan. I think it's a good plan. How we get there is to be worked out, making the sausage, so to speak. But I think that the point now is good plan, let's move on it.
Yeah. That's the outcome, that's the action items here tonight, is for the planning commission to look at accepting this plan. And then once they do that, then we get to have our discussion with whatever, however they determine their action. But I'm not telling them what to do, but they take the action first. So we had the presentation. It's up to you, and it's up to you guys. I'm not moving this along. Lisa has just said what we need to do. Yes, the presentation is complete. Are there any other questions, comments for Martina or, yes?
Is it comments on the presentation or comments on the plan?
Well, the plan is what's before us. The presentation is just representation of the plan.
You could go. No, you could go.
What I in my notes here is to take comments from the public if there is anyone.
If, do we want to open it up to public comment? Okay, we can do that. Yeah, there might be, it's open for public comment. I'll take anybody who wishes to come up to the microphone. Just come on up. You get 3 minutes to speak, your name, and if you live in Clarkdale, and I'll take anybody who's online also. So if anybody wishes to come forward and make public comment at this time. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody come up, so let's move on.
Motion. She have comment. Motion. Then setting stipulations in statute. So that's it. All right, do we have a second? I'll second. Thank you. And all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? One. Right here, zero. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to the Clarkdale's housing plan as presented. And you voted, yay. It's unanimous. That was it. So.
It's, we have a recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve the housing plan as presented. They voted to send it to us. It's in our hands. So any comments, questions on this plan? Yes.
I just have a comment. There's 2 places in the plan. One being on page, which page numbers do you want me to use? Bottom right-hand corner, page 22 of 44, which is the packet number. And again, on page 24 of 44, which is talking about the deferral of defer, reduce, or waive town fees for income-aligned housing short-term 3 years. The last paragraph says this policy, along with future incentives, will also encourage innovative financing and ownership models. I think there should be a period there. It continues, which may include a community land trust. It may include lots of things. So I'm not sure why we're just highlighting that particular option. So I just think that should end at ownership models, and that reads the same in both paragraphs.
Okay.
It's at the sort of under the. You got it? Okay. The second one is on page 24 of 44. It's the second paragraph down. Defer, reduce, or waive town fees for employer assisted house. It's also in the employer assisted housing one. Yeah.
Okay.
It's my.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
And it's just expanding what would be some financing some of the
And it's
options,
just,
correct?
yeah, it's sort of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but is your requested edit, because you guys would vote with whatever the suggested edits are, to remove the example or to add more to the example?
I would just remove the example and make
Put a
it
period.
clear, make it
So we
put a
got two
period.
places
Yeah.
where we would make that change. We've got
Okay.
them noted.
Okay. Is that pretty much in agreement with all of you? Yeah. Okay. Any other comments?
I'd like to make one more comment. I want to compliment Gus on the map. I'm the person who requested the map, and I know this was not an easy feat, and I thought it was important for us to understand where Clarkdale had, how we have grown as a
Yeah.
community around housing. And if anybody wants to nerd out on this map more, feel free to let me know. I've done a whole Excel spreadsheet on it with pie charts and graphs. So, yeah, I'll send that to you guys. Is the only other person who's interested. But I do.
I don't think so.
I think I just want to compliment you because I know this took a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of digging and a lot of creativity to make it work as a map. Yeah. Oh, you did? Okay. Okay, I'll send you mine.
And he did update it a little bit today, some minor updates to it. So we'll make sure that you guys all get that updated one and put it in here as well.
That would be great. Thank you, Scott. I was going to say, I think we all want to see that. That's like historical stuff. So, but it is interesting to see how we've grown over the years and what's developed when and how. So, with that, any other comments? I just want to say, Martina, thank you for taking us through this journey. It's been almost a year, I think.
15 months.
15
It's been my
months. Oh my
pleasure.
gosh.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all the members of the Housing Working Group who participated in this. Matt Schumacher was one of the members, and he's sitting in the back of the room. And I'm just calling him out because he's here, but there were several, and he was the one who brought some of the ideas to the school and to the families up there, and they were the ones who participated in the sort of the housing we need and what would their community look like. The kids did some amazing pictures, so I just want to really call that out, and just thank you for presenting to us several times. We saw it in drafts, and I think it's been a really good discussion tonight on this, and I appreciate everybody's perspective and thoughts and comments on it. And I look forward to hopefully us going forward with some exciting things that we can start implementing. Any other comments? Hearing none, I will take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve Clarkdale's housing plan subject to the stipulations indicated in the staff report.
Okay,
And
I'll
with the
second.
edits.
And with
And
the
edits.
changes and with the edits.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember O'Neill and second by Vice Mayor Hunsetter to approve the housing plan with the stipulations and the edits as agreed upon. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. Thank you all very much for all of this. And with that, I'll let you adjourn your meeting. You get to adjourn yours first. Yep. No, you're first. We need to change that one around.
These two, right, left, and all in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
Okay, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Babbitt Pearson, second by Vice Mayor Hunsetter to adjourn the joint meeting at 6:23 PM. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you so much, Planning Commission members, for being here, and have a good evening. Yay, we